Year 5 and 6, me, Mr. A, back with story time for another day, and carrying on with chapter 11 of Tom's Midnight Garden, and find out what Tom and Hattie get up to down the river. So, right then. And sometimes, Tom, the river is big even here. Sometimes in winter and spring there are floods, and then the water brims right up the banks and overflows them and comes flooding over this very meadow. Hattie, said Tom curiously, if you like this river, why don't you go bathing in it, where the others do? Or why don't you paddle and wade here? Or you could get a boat and go downstream for yourself and see where the river goes to. Hattie looked at Tom, startled, and said that she wasn't allowed in the meadow at all, just because of the river running by it. Her aunt said she might get her clothes muddied or wet, or most troublesome of all for everybody, she might even manage to get herself drowned. Reminded in this way of her aunt, Hattie would jump up in a frightened flurry and say she must get back into the garden, and nothing that Tom could say would dissuade her. She made her way quickly back over the meadow to the gap in the hedge. Tom followed. As the two of them left the riverside, all the geese and goslings came to land again and clambered onto the bank. The three elders, and especially the gander, watched Tom and Hattie sharply. On each occasion they were there to see them take the secret way through the hedge. The geese could not exactly be blamed for what followed. No, if anything, the arrow shooting was to blame. The geese simply used their beady eyes to see the way that Tom and Hattie went with their retrieved arrow, and then, later, went that way themselves. Their motive was almost certainly curiosity and greed, kitchen garden greed, not malice. All right, chapter 12, the geese. That went a different way to what I was expecting. I was expecting Tom and Hattie to go down the river and get into some trouble, but it seems like trouble's going to be of a different kind. Chapter 12, the geese. The geese must have started their procession through the hedge in the garden soon after sunup one day, for when the dew was still thick on the grass of the lawn, there they were. Tom had stolen down from the flat at about midnight as usual. He had opened the hall door to find early morning outside in the garden. That had not surprised him, but the sight of the geese had. The two geese and the gander raised their necks as usual to stare at him, but the goslings paid no attention. They rambled over the lawn with uncertain interest. They plucked at the grass a little. One lowered his head to sip the dew. Several curved white breast feathers lay on the lawn like little boats, and far worse, there were one or two dark green goose messes. What will they say, thought Tom, meaning Abel and Hubert and James and Edgar and Susan the housemaid, and the severe woman whom he guessed to be Hattie's aunt, all the people he knew of. Hattie he did not include among the others, because he knew she must be indirectly responsible for this, she and her secret way through the hedge. Of course Tom was to blame too. He admitted that freely to himself, and would have admitted it as freely to anyone who could have heard his voice. There were soon others to see the geese besides Tom. First of all, Abel came along one of the paths to the lawn. He halted, his blue eyes opened very wide, and his mouth too, but he stood speechless. Then the sash of one of the bedroom windows went up, and Tom heard a commanding voice that he was sure belonged to Hattie's aunt. She called to Abel and asked what the geese were doing there, although at that moment it was only too plain to see, and what he was going to do, and how they'd got there anyway, and especially, Tom's heart sank, who was to blame. Abel began methodically to answer at least the first two questions, but in the middle the window was slammed down. There was a commotion of voices and footsteps upstairs, then coming down the stairs. It sounded like the whole household coming. Tom took cover behind a tree. In this kind of situation, the instinct to hide overrode all his certainty of being unseen. He even felt uneasy that in taking up his position he had had to cross Abel's line of vision for an instant. Soon enough they all came hurrying out of the house, onto the doorstep. Hattie was with them, attracted by the excitement, and not realizing its significance for herself. Hubert, James and Edgar hovered in the forefront, ready for action. "Don't hurry them," Abel was calling from the other side of the lawn. "We'll drive them out into the orchard where they can't do any harm. Then I'll get them round into that old meadow again." Now Pincher the dog had arrived last of all. He pushed his way through the legs of the group on the doorstep and stood before them. "Get the dog away," called Abel. As he spoke he was slowly moving forward upon the geese. The three boys began the same movement, herding the geese in the direction of the door into the orchard. Nobody paid attention to Abel's warning about the dog. After all, he was remaining quietly upon the doorstep. Tom, however, could see that he had begun to shiver with excitement. He would not be able to restrain himself for long. The geese were allowing themselves to be moved along, their heads held high and ceaselessly turning. The goslings going ahead. The gaggle was suspicious, nervous, on the brink of panic. A sudden rush and barking of Pincher pushed them over that edge into a kind of goose hell that was thereupon let loose. At once, instead of 2 geese and a gander, there seemed to be a dozen, making the noise of 100. White and grey wings at the stretch seemed to bar the whole lawn and flailed the air. Geese, gander and goslings ran in the confusion of anger or terror, trampling over flower beds, trampling over their own messes, trampling over each other. Tom saw the gander at one moment making a stand in defence of his young, with his enormous flat foot squarely on the back of one of them. Luckily, a large webbed foot is by no means as dangerous as a boot, and the gosling looked hardly flatter, though more flurried afterwards. Altogether, the only damage, but it remained considerable, was to the flower beds and the lawn. Even the dog had had the sense to run clean through the storm of snapping beaks and round the outskirts and into the house again, its tail between its legs. Abel and the boys drew back a little too, a frenziedly angry gander with his wives by his side and his goslings behind him and even under him is a daunting sight. Yeah, I can testify with that. So they waited until the gaggle had a little calmed itself, and then, much more cautiously this time, they began to herd once more. Hattie ran ahead to open the orchard door. Tom stayed in hiding. There was nothing to be seen now except the devastated lawn, and on the doorstep one person remaining, Hattie's aunt. Tom had thought her stern-looking before. He liked the expression of her face even less now. All right, so we'll catch up and finish that chapter tomorrow. Meantime, have a great day, great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you again on Monday for the continuation. Take care. Bye-bye.